Today, of course, we find ourselves in a season of Advent, and one of the more popular exhortations that you find in this particular season is found in the Gospel of Mark. Gospel of Mark, chapter 13, this exhortation to stay awake. And I would suggest a lot of times people hear that particular invitation to stay awake, and they think, well, basically it translates to live in tension until the coming of the Messiah. Now, I would suggest that's not really the point of that particular invitation or exhortation. That's not really the point of this whole idea of staying awake. Because when you look at the Bible, the biblical notion of staying awake is basically this idea that the soul is doing what the soul is supposed to be doing. This idea of like processing and combining and collating and otherwise organizing various points of data. Certainly things out there in terms of like things you discern happening out there in the world, but also things happening within your heart, your imagination, your intellect, that sort of thing, right? To help you discern reality. What is actually happening? What is actually real? To help you choose and live accordingly. And you put a pause in that, you think about sleep, right? So we think about sleep typically in terms of a strictly physical thing, but from a spiritual perspective, in the context of the Bible, sleep is the opposite. So the soul is not doing all those things that it's supposed to be doing, all those things we just cited, as a result of which I'm not really aware of reality, so I'm not living the reflective life, and therefore I'm not living the purposeful life. The simple way to put it is to frame it in terms of this threefold paradigm that you find often in terms of spiritual discernment. See, judge, and act. See, judge, and act. So first of all, see. Am I aware of my experience? Again, not just stuff out there, but things going on in my heart. I'm aware of these things. Am I aware that I'm in a fight? Am I aware of the fact that I'm in the midst of a spiritual battle? So see. Judge, when it comes to particular movements of the heart, when I feel moved to do this, when I'm inclined to do that, do I recognize this is from the good spirit, this is from the evil spirit? And then finally, acting, right? If I discern this is from the evil spirit, then obviously the thing to do is to firmly reject. To not weakly push away the evil spirit, but to say, no, this is not from the Lord, so I firmly reject this thing. Whereas in contrast, you think about impulses from the good spirit, otherwise known as impulses from the good shepherd, to savor, to taste and see the Lord is good, to keep and ponder. So see, judge, and act. To kind of flesh this out in some detail, I want to spend some time unpacking one of Paul's most famous letters. Letter to the Philippians, chapter 4, verse 6 to 8, where St. Paul gives really specific instructions as to how to bring to bear this threefold paradigm of seeing and judging and acting. So first of all, what St. Paul says is, don't worry. Don't worry. Instead, make all your requests known to God in prayer, and then the peace of Christ, which is beyond all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds. So again, don't worry. In a really interesting sort of way, the Lord, through St. Paul, is basically calling us out for our tendency to rationalize our stress. We do this all the time. Somehow we think that we're unique, I'm the only one with problems and issues and difficulties, and I'm the only one with time constraints. And so therefore, because all these things are happening in my life, therefore, I have no choice but to freak out. Right? The example that comes to mind, I was talking to a friend of mine once, and he basically said to me, Eric, I think the reason why you're calm is because you're naturally calm, and you have no problems. Now, ironically, when he said that, I was annoyed. And so I responded by saying, no, always a good comeback. But then I said, the reason why I'm calm is not because I'm naturally calm. The reason why I'm calm is because I believe in God. Like, I'm aware of the reality of evil, just like the next guy. Perhaps even more acutely so, because that's part of the job description, right? So it's not a matter of that. It's not like rose-colored glasses. It's not because I'm naturally calm. I believe in God. And more to the point, I trust in the Lord. I'm trying my best all the time to situate everything in God's call, something we tend to forget. So in terms of our natural disposition, yeah, maybe I'm inclined to do this as opposed to that. The emotional temperament, right? Mindful of the fact that our emotions have no moral content. So whether you feel sad or angry or happy or whatever, it's not good or bad, it's simply how you feel. And you might be more inclined in certain situations to feel this as opposed to that. Yeah, that's a function of temperament. But you always have the ability to choose. And you're meant to choose based on principles of discernment. Is the Lord calling me to pursue this particular disposition of heart? Is he calling me to make this choice, to pursue this movement of the soul? And what you realize pretty quickly, the Lord never calls you to freak out. This is not from the good spirit, so I'm called to firmly reject and go the way of not worrying. I don't worry. I give all my cares and concerns to Christ the Lord, and I stay in a space of peace and reconciliation. So that's kind of the first thing. Second thing St. Paul says, though, is keep on doing all these things you have learned from me. Everything you have heard me say, everything you've seen me do. So the idea here is to make sure you're always in the right relationship with God. So when you examine your heart, I mean, certainly we're all imperfect. Certainly we're all like pilgrims on the journey, right? But to ask yourself, is there some significant thing which is pulling me out of right relationship with the Lord? And to address that. And maybe it's simply a matter of being honest, right? Being honest about, is there a particular sin that I just haven't addressed? Maybe this is something I've done before, maybe this is something I'm still doing. Maybe I simply need to bring this thing to confession and go to way of atonement and reconciliation. Or maybe it's just kind of like looking at habits. Is there something that I know I should be doing that I'm just not doing? And maybe the season of Advent is a time to kind of bring these things to the table. Maybe it's simply a matter of like, you know what, maybe I should go to Mass like every Sunday. Maybe I should go to confession on a regular basis. Maybe instead of praying to the Lord simply in modes of crisis, maybe I should pray to Him all the time. You know, befitting this desire for an ongoing personal relationship with Christ the Lord. Third thing St. Paul says, third and final thing, he says, whatever is good, whatever is honorable and true and just, think about these things. So it's a variation of like no in favor or good or yes. So certainly no to worry, no to anxiety, no to fear, but yes to what? Yes to anything which is true and noble and honorable and just. To populate and saturate your mind and your heart with good and holy things. So you're not simply saying no to the inclinations of the evil spirit, but you're actually savoring, tasting and seeing that the Lord actually wants you to feel these things which are good and holy and true. Filling your heart and mind with anything which is good and holy and true to fortify you against the evil and wickedness and snares of the devil. I'll give you one final example, I'll end with this. So this is a story involving St. John Fisher, so a really famous saint and martyr from the 16th century. Really short story, but basically the idea is he was trapped in a prison cell back in the day, waiting to be killed. And all of a sudden that day came. And so 5 o'clock in the morning, the jailer came in and said, look, John Fisher, you will be executed at noon today. And he thought, well, 5 o'clock right now, noon. So he told the jailer, look, I'm pretty tired. I'm going to go to bed. So can you wake me up in a couple hours? And with that, he went to sleep. And that's the end of the story, you know? And I love that story because it brings together all these things we're talking about today, right? So the idea is, okay, when I make sure that I never worry or never give into fear or anxiety, when I make sure that I'm always in right relationship with the Lord, when I make sure to populate my mind and my heart with good and holy desires and thoughts and hopes and dreams, then I'm staying awake, but ironically, that gives me the freedom to sleep and to sleep well.